At 2:07 a.m., my phone rang and I almost didn't answer. But then I saw his name. Grandma. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper, shaking so hard it didn't sound like him. She hit me. My heart dropped. I sat up so fast the room spun. What happened? "Where's your dad?" I asked. Silence, then a quiet sob. I'm scared. The line went dead. I didn't change, didn't think. I grabbed my keys and drove into the dark, my hands trembling on the wheel. And when I reached that house, when I heard the shouting inside, I didn't knock. If this opening pulled you in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It truly helps. Stories like this reach more people. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if you got that call at 2 a.m.? Also, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? My name is Adeline Brooks. I'm 67 years old, a widow of 12 years, and for most of my life, I believed I understood people, especially children. I spent over 3 decades working in elementary education, the last 15, as a vice principal in a public school just outside Columbus, Ohio. I learned how to read the small signs, the quiet ones, the ones adults often miss because they're too busy explaining things away. A child who suddenly stops making eye contact, a child who flinches when someone raises their voice, a child who says, "It's okay" too quickly. I had seen all of that before. I just never imagined I'd miss it in my own family. My son, Michael Brooks, was a good man. Not perfect, but good. He was the kind of boy who used to bring me wildflowers from the yard and apologize when he stepped on ants. Even as an adult, he carried that same softness. He worked hard, built a steady career as a regional sales manager, bought a modest home in a quiet neighborhood, and married a woman he said made him feel balanced. Her name was Rachel. The first time I met her, she was polite, smiled often, asked thoughtful questions. She brought a bottle of wine to dinner and complimented my cooking in a way that felt practiced, but not necessarily insincere. I remember thinking she was composed, organized, maybe a little too aware of how she came across, but I told myself that wasn't a bad thing. People show their best sides in the beginning. It wasn't until after Ethan was born that I started to feel something shift. Small things at first. Rachel began correcting Ethan in ways that felt sharp, not just guiding him, but controlling him. If he laughed too loudly, she'd tell him to quiet down. If he interrupted, she didn't gently redirect him. She shut him down completely. Once when he spilled juice at the table, she grabbed his wrist a little too tightly. Not enough to leave a mark, but enough that he froze instead of crying. I remember watching that moment longer than I should have. And I remember what I told myself afterward. She's just stressed. Being a mother is hard. I wish I could go back and shake that version of myself. Over the past 2 years, those moments didn't disappear. They just became easier to miss. Or maybe easier to excuse. Michael stopped calling as often. When he did, our conversations felt shorter, thinner somehow. Like he was speaking from behind a wall I couldn't see through. How are things, I'd ask. Good. Busy but good. And Rachel? She's fine, Mom. Just tired. And Ethan? He's doing great. But then I'd see Ethan in person, and he wasn't great. He clung to me more than he used to. Sat closer, spoke softer. Once when I dropped a pan in the kitchen and it clanged loudly against the floor, he jumped so hard he knocked his chair back. I laughed instinctively. He didn't. He just looked toward the hallway, toward Rachel. And that stayed with me. There were other things, too. Rachel had a way of inserting herself into every conversation between me and Ethan. If I asked him about school, she answered. If I asked him what he wanted for his birthday, she'd say we already decided. If I tried to hug him goodbye, she'd remind him, say thank you properly, always watching, always managing. And Michael. He let it happen. At first I thought he was just trying to keep the peace, but over time it started to feel like something else, like he was afraid of upsetting her. I brought it up once, gently. Are you happy? I asked him while we were alone in the backyard, grilling burgers like we used to. He paused. Just for a second, then he smiled. Of course I am, Mom. But his eyes didn't match. I should have pressed harder. I didn't. Because there's a certain lie parents tell themselves when their children grow up. If something were truly wrong, they would tell me. That night, the night of the call, proved how wrong that belief can be. The streets were nearly empty as I drove, the kind of quiet that only exists in the early hours of the morning when the world feels paused between yesterday and whatever comes next. My hands were tight on the steering wheel. I kept replaying Ethan's voice in my head. She hit me. Not she yelled, not she got mad. She hit me. I had heard enough children use that exact phrase to know what it usually meant and what it didn't. Every red light felt like an insult. Every second stretched too long. I remember gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned pale, my breath coming shallow, like I was the one hiding behind a couch somewhere. By the time I turned onto Michael's street, my heart was pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. His house stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, a 2-story place with white siding and a porch light that always stayed on. Except tonight, the porch light was off. Only one light glowed from inside. Downstairs, I pulled into the driveway too fast, my tires crunching sharply against the gravel. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the front door. Something felt wrong. Not just tense. Wrong. Then I heard it. A voice raised, sharp, female, Rachel. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. The tone alone sent a chill through me. Another sound followed. A crash, glass, maybe a plate. Then Michael's voice lower strained, and then silence. The kind that doesn't calm you, the kind that warns you. I was out of the car before I even realized I had opened the door. The night air hit my face, cold and biting, but I barely felt it. My focus was locked on that house, on that door, on my grandson. I walked up the steps quickly, my chest tight, my mind racing through a dozen possibilities I didn't want to name. What if I was too late? What if no? I refused to finish that thought. I reached the front door and knocked. Once. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing, but I knew they were inside. I had heard them, and then faintly, a sound. Not shouting, not breaking glass, a small, muffled sound. A child trying not to cry. Something inside me shifted in that moment. Not panic, not fear, something colder, clearer. I tried the handle. Unlocked. That alone made my stomach drop. Michael always locked his doors. Always. My hand rested on the knob for half a second longer than necessary. Just long enough for one final thought to pass through my mind. If I open this door, everything might change. But then I heard it again. That small, broken sound. And that was it. I turned the handle and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed when I stepped inside wasn't the shouting. It was the smell. Something sharp, like spilled wine mixed with something burned. The air felt heavy, thick in a way that made it harder to breathe. The living room lights were on too bright for that hour, casting harsh shadows across a space that looked wrong. Not messy, disturbed. A chair was knocked over near the coffee table. A picture frame. One of those family portraits Rachel insisted on taking every year lay shattered on the floor, glass scattered like ice. I recognized the photo instantly. Michael standing stiffly. Rachel smiling too wide. Ethan in the middle, his little hand gripping his father's sleeve. I barely had time to process it before I heard movement. Mom Michael's voice came from the kitchen. I turned and what I saw stopped me cold. He was standing near the counter, one hand braced against it like he needed the support just to stay upright. His lower lip was split blood-dried along the edge, and there was already a dark bruise forming along his cheekbone. His shirt was wrinkled, half untucked, like someone had grabbed him. My son, my grown, steady, careful son looked like he had just walked out of a fight he didn't win. "Michael," I whispered. But before I could reach him, something moved behind the couch. A small shape, curled tight. Grandma Ethan. His voice was barely audible, but the moment he saw me, something in his face broke. He scrambled up from behind the couch and ran straight into me, his arms wrapping around my waist so tightly it almost hurt. "I'm here," I said immediately, dropping to my knees and pulling him close. "I'm here, sweetheart, you're okay." He was shaking. Not crying loudly. No, it was worse than that. His whole body trembled in silence, like he had learned not to make too much noise. I felt something inside my chest crack open. "What happened?" I asked softly, brushing my hand over his hair. He didn't answer. Instead, he pressed his face deeper into my coat, and that's when I heard her. "Oh, good, you're here." Rachel's voice. Too calm. I looked up. She was standing in the kitchen doorway, one hand resting against the frame, the other holding a dish towel like nothing about this night was unusual. Her hair was slightly out of place, her mascara faintly smudged, but her posture was composed, controlled, calculated. "What is going on?" I demanded, rising slowly but keeping one arm wrapped around Ethan. Rachel sighed. Not in frustration, in annoyance. He wouldn't listen. She said, nodding toward Ethan like he was the problem. "I told him 3 times to go to bed. 3 times. But he just kept talking back. He's 8, I snapped. That doesn't justify I didn't hit him." She cut in quickly, her tone sharpening just a fraction. I tapped his arm. "There's a difference." Ethan flinched beside me. That was all I needed. I turned my attention back to Michael. "Is that true?" He hesitated. Just for a second, but I saw it. And so did she. "Michael," Rachel said softly, her voice suddenly gentle, almost soothing. "Tell your mother what happened." The shift in her tone was so abrupt it made my skin crawl. Michael swallowed. "It just got out of hand," he muttered. "Out of hand," I repeated. "You're bleeding." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, Adeline, it's not what you think. He tried to grab me when I was disciplining Ethan, and we both lost our balance. That's all. That's not what it looked like when I walked in," I said coldly. "And what exactly did it look like she challenged, crossing her arms? Like control, like fear, like something that had been building for far too long." Before I could answer, Michael stepped forward slightly. "Mom," he said quietly, "can you just take Ethan upstairs for a minute?" I frowned. "Why, please?" There was something in his voice I hadn't heard in years. Not authority, not confidence. Desperation. I looked down at Ethan. His fingers were still clutching my coat, his small body pressed close, like letting go wasn't an option. "Okay," I said finally. "Come on, sweetheart." As we moved toward the stairs, I felt Rachel's eyes on us, watching, calculating. The moment we reached the top, Ethan pulled me quickly toward his room and shut the door behind us. Then he locked it. That sound, soft mechanical, echoed louder than anything else that night. "Ethan," I said, gently kneeling in front of him, "talk to me." He shook his head at first, his eyes wide, darting toward the door like he expected it to open at any second. "She's going to hear," he whispered. "No, she won't," I assured him. "I'm here." He hesitated. Then slowly, carefully, he rolled up the sleeve of his pajama top. My breath caught. There on his upper arm were faint red marks, not severe, not yet bruised, but unmistakable. My stomach twisted. "She grabbed me," he said quietly. "And then, she slapped me." I closed my eyes for a brief second, steadying myself. "How often?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at the floor. "Only when she gets really mad," he murmured. That answer was worse than anything else, because it meant this wasn't new. This was routine. "She doesn't like it when Daddy says no," he added. I froze. "What do you mean?" Ethan swallowed. "They fight a lot, at night, when they think I'm sleeping." My chest tightened. "What do they fight about?" He shook his head. "I don't know, but Daddy always says, 'Please, Rachel,' not in front of him." Silence filled the room, heavy, unavoidable. And then Ethan said something that made the air feel like it disappeared entirely. "Daddy says we have to be careful," he whispered, "because she can ruin us." I stared at him. "Ruin you?" He nodded slowly. "She says she'll make people believe things that aren't true." A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just anger. This wasn't just stress. This was control. Carefully built. Carefully maintained. I pulled Ethan into my arms again, holding him tighter this time. "You did the right thing calling me," I said softly. "Do you understand?" "You did exactly the right thing." He nodded against my shoulder. I was scared he admitted. "I know," I whispered, "but you're not alone anymore." As I held him, my eyes drifted around the room, and that's when I noticed it. His backpack, sitting near the edge of the bed, unzipped, stuffed, clothes, a toothbrush, a small toy tucked inside. My heart sank. He had packed, quietly, secretly, preparing. For what? To leave, to run. The realization hit me like a wave. This wasn't just one bad night. This was a child who had been living in fear long enough to make a plan. Downstairs, I heard movement again. Footsteps, slower now, quieter. And then Rachel's voice. Calm, too calm. "We need to talk about money, Michael." I went still. Money, of all things. After everything that had just happened, that was what she cared about. I gently pulled back from Ethan, brushing a tear from his cheek. "Stay here," I said softly. "Lock the door again after me." His eyes widened. "Don't go." "I'm not leaving," I assured him. "I'm right downstairs." He hesitated, then nodded. As I stood, something inside me had already changed. I hadn't fully named it yet, but it was there, clear, solid, unshakable. I opened the door quietly and stepped back into the hallway. And as I made my way toward the stairs, one thought echoed in my mind louder than anything else. This wasn't just about what happened tonight. This was about everything that had been happening for far too long. I paused at the top of the stairs, my hand resting lightly on the railing, forcing myself to breathe slowly before going back down. In my years working in schools, I had learned something very important. When chaos suddenly becomes calm, it's rarely over. It usually means something else has begun. And right now, the house below me had gone quiet. Too quiet. No shouting, no crashing, no panic. Just silence. The kind that feels deliberate, measured. I descended the stairs carefully, each step creaking louder than it should have in the stillness. By the time I reached the bottom, I could hear their voices again, but now they were lower controlled. Calculated. "We can't keep doing this," Michael was saying. "You don't get to decide," that Rachel replied, her tone smooth, almost conversational. I stepped into the living room. Both of them turned toward me. The shift in Rachel's expression was immediate. Gone was the hysteria I had seen minutes ago. Gone was the anger. Now she looked composed, collected, even slightly amused. It was like watching someone switch masks. "Is he settled?" she asked lightly, as if we were discussing bedtime routines and not what had just happened. "He's scared," I said plainly. Rachel sighed again, pressing her fingers lightly to her temple. "He's always sensitive. You know that." "No," I replied, holding her gaze. "I know the difference between sensitivity and fear." Something flickered in her eyes, brief, sharp, but it disappeared just as quickly. Michael stepped forward, running a hand through his hair. "Mom, maybe we should all just calm down." "Calm down," I cut in. "Your son called me at 2 a.m. because he said he was hit." Rachel let out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, please. Children exaggerate. You of all people should know that." "I also know when they whisper," I said. And he whispered. That landed. For a split second, Rachel didn't respond. Then she tilted her head slightly, studying me in a way that felt less like conversation and more like assessment. "You're making this bigger than it is," she said slowly. "This is a family matter." "No," I replied, my voice steady. "This stopped being a private family matter the moment a child became afraid to speak out loud." The room went still again. Michael looked between us, his face tense like he was bracing for something he couldn't stop. Rachel exhaled slowly, then walked past him into the living room, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She picked up the fallen picture frame, glancing down at the cracked glass before setting it carefully on the table. "Fine," she said. "Since we're all being so honest tonight, let's talk about what's actually going on." Her tone had changed again. Not emotional, strategic. She turned toward Michael. "Go ahead," she said. "Tell her." Michael didn't move. "Tell me what I asked." He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Michael." He finally looked at me, and the expression in his eyes made my stomach drop. Shame. Deep, heavy, suffocating shame. "I messed up," he said quietly. Rachel crossed her arms, watching him closely. "How I pressed." He swallowed. "At work, a few months ago, I made some bad decisions, tried to recover a lost account, and ended up digging myself deeper instead." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," Rachel cut in smoothly, "that your son put us in financial danger." I turned back to Michael. "Is that true?" He nodded slowly. "How bad's silence?" Rachel smiled faintly. "Bad enough she said that we could lose everything if it's not handled correctly." A cold weight settled in my chest. "What does that have to do with tonight?" I demanded. Rachel's eyes met mine. "Everything." That's what her silence said. "She found out before I could fix it," Michael admitted. "And since then," he trailed off. "Since then," Rachel continued for him, "I've been the one keeping this family afloat." "By hitting a child," I shot back. Her expression hardened slightly. "By maintaining control," she corrected. The word control hung in the air like something tangible. I felt it then. Not just tension, not just conflict. Structure. A system. One she had built. "You've taken over everything, haven't you?" I said slowly. Rachel didn't deny it. "Someone had to," she replied. "What exactly does that mean?" I asked. "It means," she said, stepping closer, "that I handle the accounts, the bills, the decisions. Because clearly Michael isn't capable of doing it responsibly anymore. That doesn't give you the right to do what she interrupted, to enforce discipline, to keep things from falling apart." Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp, precise, and underneath it there was something else. Threat. I turned to Michael. "Why didn't you tell me?" He looked down. "I was going to fix it," he said. "I didn't want you to worry. You didn't want me to know I corrected." He didn't argue. That told me everything. "How much control does she have?" I asked quietly. Michael hesitated again, then almost reluctantly, "Everything." I felt my breath catch. "What do you mean, everything?" "My accounts," he said. "My email, my passwords. She handles all of it now." I looked at Rachel. She didn't look ashamed. If anything, she looked justified. "That's not normal," I said. "No," she agreed calmly. "It's necessary." The word landed like a stone. Necessary, not helpful, not temporary. Necessary for what I asked. She smiled faintly. To prevent further damage. There it was again. That sense of something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface. "And if he doesn't cooperate?" I asked carefully. Rachel's gaze didn't waver. "Then consequences happen." My stomach tightened. What kind of consequences? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she glanced toward the staircase, toward Ethan, and that was enough. A slow, cold realization spread through me. This wasn't just about money. This was leverage, control through fear, control through exposure, control through a child. I felt something inside me harden. "You don't get to use him." I said, my voice quieter now but stronger. "Not for this, not for anything." Rachel's expression shifted again. Not anger, not even irritation. Something closer to calculation. "You're overstepping," she said softly. "No," I replied. "I'm stepping in." Michael closed his eyes briefly, like he knew this moment had been coming, and maybe deep down he had been waiting for it. Rachel looked between us. Then slowly she exhaled. "You really don't understand the situation," she said. "Then explain it to me," I challenged. She tilted her head slightly, and for the first time that night, her voice dropped into something colder, more honest. "Your son doesn't just owe money," she said. "He owes enough that if certain people start asking questions, things could get very complicated." I felt my pulse spike. "What people?" She smiled faintly, the kind who don't like being ignored. The room seemed to shrink. Michael looked like he might be sick, and suddenly everything felt bigger than I had realized, more dangerous, more layered. This wasn't just a troubled marriage. This was a situation built on fear, secrecy, and something neither of them had fully said out loud. I straightened slowly, and in that moment, one thing became absolutely clear. Whatever had been holding this house together wasn't stability. It was pressure, and it was about to break. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence that followed Rachel's words felt heavier than anything that had come before. Not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. The kind who don't like being ignored. That wasn't just a warning. It was a message. And it wasn't meant for me. It was meant for Michael. I turned to him slowly. "Michael," I said, keeping my voice steady. "What is she talking about?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he sank down into the edge of the couch like something inside him had finally given out. His shoulders slumped forward, his hands hanging loosely between his knees, his eyes fixed on the floor. I had seen that posture before, not in my son, but in parents sitting across from me in my office years ago when they knew they had made a mistake they couldn't undo. "Tell her," Rachel said quietly. Her tone wasn't sharp this time. It was patient, almost encouraging, but underneath it there was something else. Control. Michael swallowed hard. "I borrowed money," he said. "How much?" I asked. He hesitated. "Michael, a lot," he admitted, "more than I should have. That doesn't explain what she just said." He rubbed his face with both hands, dragging them down slowly like he was trying to pull himself together. "I thought I could fix it," he said. "I lost a major account at work, one of my biggest clients. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And instead of reporting it right away, I tried to recover the loss on my own." My chest tightened. "How I moved money," he said quietly. Between accounts, temporary adjustments. I told myself it was just until I landed a new deal. That's not just a bad decision, I said carefully. I know what it is. He cut in, his voice breaking slightly. I know. Rachel watched him, arms still crossed, her expression unreadable. And when did you tell her I asked? Michael let out a short, hollow laugh. I didn't. Of course he didn't. She found out, Rachel said smoothly, by accident. I noticed irregularities in the statements and started digging. And what I found, she shook her head lightly. Let's just say it wasn't something we could ignore. I turned back to Michael. So she confronted you? He nodded. And then what? He hesitated again. That hesitation told me everything. She didn't just confront you, I said slowly. She took over. Michael's silence confirmed it. Rachel didn't deny it. Instead, she stepped forward slightly, her voice calm and deliberate. I stabilized the situation, she said. Someone had to, by taking control of everything I asked. Yes. Without his consent, her lips curved faintly. Oh, he consented. I looked at Michael. His eyes stayed on the floor. Michael, I didn't have a choice, he muttered. You always have a choice. Not when everything is on the line. He snapped suddenly, his voice rising for the first time. Not when one wrong move could cost me my job, my reputation, everything. The outburst hung in the air. Then just as quickly, it faded. He looked exhausted, defeated. And that scared me more than anything, because this wasn't just fear. This was resignation. Rachel took advantage of that moment immediately. You see, she said, turning to me, he understands the stakes. That's why he agreed to let me handle things how I pressed. She ticked it off on her fingers almost casually. I manage the finances. I monitor the accounts. I control access to sensitive information. I make sure nothing else slips. You mean you control him? I said. She didn't flinch. I protect what's left of this family. That's not protection, I said. That's domination. Rachel's eyes hardened slightly. You can call it whatever you want. The result is the same. And what about Ethan, I asked. Is he part of your system too? Her expression shifted, just slightly. He needs structure, she said. He needs safety, I corrected. He has that. No, I said firmly. He doesn't. The tension in the room spiked again. Michael stood up abruptly, pacing a few steps before stopping near the window. I didn't want it to get like this, he said quietly. Then why did you let it, I asked. He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Because the truth was already written all over him. Shame had kept him silent. Fear had kept him compliant. And Rachel had built everything else on top of that. I tried to fix it, he said finally. I really did. But every time I thought I had a way out, something else went wrong. Another payment, another deadline, another threat. Threat I repeated. He hesitated. Rachel didn't. If he doesn't cooperate, she said calmly, I have options. My stomach turned. What kind of options? She looked directly at me. Legal ones. The words sent a chill through me. What does that mean? It means, she said, her voice soft but precise, that if necessary, I can report everything. I stared at her. You would destroy your own husband. If that's what it takes to protect myself and my child, she replied, without hesitation. My chest tightened. And you think that's protection? I asked. I think it's survival. There it was. The truth beneath everything. Not love, not partnership, survival, at any cost. I turned back to Michael. Is this what you've been living with? I asked. He nodded slowly. And Ethan, I pressed. What has he been living with? Michael closed his eyes. That's not he started. Yes, it is, I said firmly. He hears it. He feels it. He's afraid of it. Rachel let out another sigh, clearly losing patience. You're dramatizing this, she said. Children adapt. No, I replied. They endure. And there is a difference, a very big one. I walked closer to her, my voice dropping but gaining strength. You don't get to call this normal, I said. You don't get to justify fear as structure or control as protection. Her gaze met mine, unblinking. And you don't get to walk in here in the middle of the night and pretend you understand everything, she shot back. I understand enough, I said. Do you? She challenged. Do you understand what happens if this falls apart? If his job finds out, if the wrong people start asking questions, I held her gaze. I understand that a child is already paying the price. That landed. For the first time, Rachel didn't respond immediately. But when she did, her voice was colder than before. You're interfering in something you can't fix. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. I'm stepping into something that should have been stopped a long time ago. Michael turned toward me, his expression conflicted. Mom. I'm taking Ethan with me tonight, I said. The words came out calm, clear, final. Rachel stiffened. No, you're not. Yes, I said, I am. He's my son. And he's my grandson, I replied. And right now, he's scared enough to call me at 2 a.m. instead of staying in his own room. That doesn't give you the right to take him, she snapped. It gives me every reason to protect him. The room fell silent again, but this time it felt different. Not tense, decisive, because something had shifted, not just in me, in all of us. Rachel looked at Michael. Say something. Michael didn't. He just stood there, caught between fear and something else, something fragile, something that looked a lot like the beginning of courage. And in that moment, I realized something important. Rachel's control had always depended on his silence. And tonight, that silence was starting to crack. For a long second, no one moved. Rachel stood rigid, her eyes fixed on Michael, waiting, no expecting him to correct me, to step in, to restore the balance she had so carefully maintained. Say something, she repeated, her voice sharper this time. Michael didn't look at her. He looked at me. And in his eyes, I saw it clearly now, the war that had been happening inside him for months, maybe longer. Fear pulling one way, guilt pulling another, and somewhere underneath it all, a father who knew something was wrong. I think, he began, then stopped. Rachel's jaw tightened. Michael. He took a breath. I think Ethan should go with Mom tonight. The words landed like a crack of thunder. Rachel blinked, just once. But it was enough. Because for the first time since I'd walked into that house, she wasn't in control of the next move. No, she said immediately. Michael didn't back down. It's just for tonight, he added quickly. Things are tense. He's scared. We all need space. Rachel laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think sending him away is going to fix this? She asked. You think hiding the problem makes it disappear? No, I said calmly. I think removing a child from fear is the first step toward fixing anything. She turned toward me, her composure beginning to crack at the edges. You don't get to make that decision. I'm not asking for permission, I replied. Her eyes flashed. That's exactly the problem. The tension in the room rose again, thick and suffocating. But this time something was different. Michael didn't step back. He didn't shrink. He stayed where he was. And that, more than anything, seemed to unsettle her. You're overreacting, Rachel said, her voice tightening. This was one incident. No, I said, this was one incident that was finally spoken out loud. She opened her mouth to argue, but before she could, a small sound came from the stairs. Footsteps, soft, hesitant. We all turned. Ethan stood halfway down the staircase, his small hand gripping the railing, his eyes wide as he looked between us. I locked the door, he said quietly, as if that was the most important thing to report. My heart twisted. You did good, I said gently. Come here, sweetheart. He didn't move right away. Instead, he looked at his father. Am I in trouble? He asked. The question hit harder than anything else that night. Michael's face crumpled slightly. No, he said, his voice thick. No, you're not in trouble. Ethan nodded, but he still didn't move, because he wasn't waiting for his father. He was watching Rachel, waiting for her reaction, waiting for permission, waiting for safety. And that was when I knew with absolute certainty that I was not leaving him there. Not tonight. Not again. Come here, I said, holding out my hand. After a brief hesitation, Ethan came down the rest of the stairs and walked straight to me, slipping his hand into mine. It was cold. Too cold. We're going to my house for the night, I told him softly. He looked up at me. Just tonight, for now, I said. That seemed to be enough. He nodded. Behind us, Rachel let out a slow breath. This is ridiculous, she muttered. You're turning this into something it's not. I didn't respond. Instead, I reached for Ethan's backpack, the one I had seen upstairs, the one already packed. Rachel noticed immediately. Her eyes narrowed. What is that? She asked. His bag? I said. He packed it, Ethan added quietly. Silence, heavy, revealing. Rachel's gaze snapped to Michael. You let this happen? I didn't know, he said. But even as he said it, I could tell he wasn't entirely surprised. That realization settled between them like something undeniable. A truth neither of them could ignore anymore. Rachel straightened slightly, her posture sharpening. Fine, she said. Take him. The sudden shift caught me off guard. Too easy, too fast. But don't pretend this is some heroic rescue, she continued. You're making things worse. How I asked. She smiled faintly. By interfering in a situation you don't fully understand. There it was again. That warning. That suggestion of something deeper, something still unsaid. I held her gaze. Then maybe it's time I understand all of it. For a brief moment, something flickered in her expression. Not anger, not frustration, concern, but it disappeared almost instantly. Be careful what you go looking for, she said quietly. I didn't respond, because at that point I already knew whatever I was about to uncover, it couldn't be worse than what Ethan had already lived through. I crouched down in front of him, adjusting the straps of his backpack gently. Ready, I asked. He nodded. But before we turned toward the door, I noticed something on his arm again. The marks. Fainter now in the light, but still there. I pulled out my phone slowly. What are you doing? Rachel asked sharply. Documenting, I said simply. Her expression hardened. You don't have my permission to take pictures. I don't need it, I replied. And before she could react, I snapped a quick photo, then another, and then one more just to be sure. Michael watched silently. Rachel did not. You're crossing a line, she said. No, I answered. I'm drawing one. The words hung in the air, clear, unmistakable, and for the first time since I had arrived, Rachel didn't try to push past it. She just stood there, watching, calculating again. But now she wasn't the only one doing that, because I had started to see the pattern, the control, the pressure, the fear, and I wasn't walking away from it. Not anymore. I stood taking Ethan's hand again. Come on, I said softly. We walked toward the door. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because I doubted the decision, but because I knew what it meant. This wasn't just a visit. This was the beginning of something. Something bigger, something that would not be easily undone. Behind us, Michael spoke. Mom, I turned. He looked at me, really looked this time, not avoiding, not hiding. I'm sorry, he said. I held his gaze. We'll talk, I replied, but right now, you need to think about what matters most. His eyes shifted briefly toward Ethan, then back to me. And in that moment, I saw it. Not strength, not yet, but the possibility of it. And sometimes, that's where everything begins. I opened the door, the cold night air rushed in, fresh, sharp, real. Ethan squeezed my hand, and together we stepped out. The drive back to my house felt longer than it should have. Not because of traffic, there was none. Not because of distance, it was barely 15 minutes. But because of what sat beside me. Silence. Heavy, fragile silence. Ethan didn't speak after we left. He just held onto my hand, his small fingers wrapped tightly around mine, like letting go might pull him back into something he couldn't face again. I didn't rush him. I had learned long ago children talk when they feel safe enough. Not when they're asked to. The streetlights flickered past us in slow intervals, casting soft shadows across his face. His eyes stayed open, staring ahead but distant. Processing, surviving. When we finally pulled into my driveway, I turned off the engine but didn't move right away. We're home, I said gently. Ethan nodded, but his grip didn't loosen. I opened my door, walked around, and helped him out of the car. The night air was colder here, quieter. My house sat at the edge of a calm street lined with maple trees, nothing like the tension we had just left behind. Inside, everything was still. Familiar, safe. I had always kept my home that way. Simple routines, warm lighting, no raised voices, no sudden movements. I used to think it was just habit. Now I realized it had always been intentional, a place where nothing unpredictable could hurt you. Come on, I said softly, locking the door behind us. Let's get you settled. Ethan followed me without hesitation. That alone told me everything. No looking over his shoulder, no waiting for permission, just quiet trust. I led him into the kitchen first. Are you hungry? I asked. He shrugged slightly. I don't know. That answer, I recognized it. It didn't mean he wasn't hungry. It meant he wasn't used to being asked. I opened the fridge and pulled out some leftovers. Simple things. Soup, bread, nothing complicated. Sit, I told him, gesturing toward the table. He climbed into the chair slowly, his movements careful, like he was still adjusting to a different set of rules. I warmed the soup, set it in front of him, and watched as he hesitated. "You don't have to eat if you don't want to," I said. He looked up at me. Then quietly, he picked up the spoon. The first few bites were slow, then faster, then steady. He hadn't realized he was hungry, but his body had. I sat across from him, not interrupting, not asking questions, just watching, waiting. When he finished, he set the spoon down carefully, almost like he didn't want to make a sound. "Thank you," he said. My chest tightened. "You don't have to thank me for that," I replied softly. He nodded, but I could tell he thought he did. I stood and walked over, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Let's get you ready for bed." He followed me upstairs. I had a spare room already prepared, something I had kept ready over the years for visits, though they had become less frequent. I opened the door, flipping on the light. The room was simple: clean sheets, a small nightstand, a lamp with soft yellow light, nothing overwhelming, just calm. Ethan stepped inside, slowly looking around like he was memorizing it. "Is this where I'm sleeping?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded, then walked over and placed his backpack gently on the bed, carefully, like it mattered, like it was important. I noticed how he didn't unpack, didn't relax, didn't assume anything, because somewhere inside him he still wasn't sure how long this would last. "You can stay as long as you need," I said quietly. He looked at me, really looked. "Okay," he whispered. I helped him get settled, handed him a clean set of pajamas, and stepped out briefly to give him space. When I returned, he was already under the covers, wide awake. "You want the light on?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Just a little," he said. I adjusted the lamp. Soft, warm. Enough to push the dark away without overwhelming him. I sat on the edge of the bed. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then softly, "Grandma, yes, are you mad at me?" The question hit like a knife. "No," I said immediately. "Why would I be mad at you?" He looked down at the blanket. "Because I called you," he said, "and now everything is different." I felt my throat tighten. "Ethan," I said gently, "nothing that happened tonight is your fault." He didn't respond, so I continued. "You didn't cause it, you didn't make it happen, and calling me, that was the bravest thing you could have done." His eyes filled slightly. "But she said," "I don't care what she said," I interrupted softly but firmly. "You hear me? I care about what's true." He looked at me. "And the truth is, you were scared, and you asked for help." I reached out, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "That is never wrong." He stared at me for a moment longer. Then slowly he nodded. Some of the tension in his shoulders eased, just a little. "Will I have to go back?" he asked quietly. There it was. The question I knew was coming. I didn't answer right away, because I wasn't going to lie to him, but I also wasn't going to let fear answer for me. "We're going to figure that out," I said carefully. "The right way." He studied my face, searching for something. Reassurance, certainty, safety. "I won't let anything happen to you," I added, and that was something I could promise. He took a breath, then slowly lay back against the pillow. I stayed there until his eyes began to close, until his breathing evened out, until the tight grip he had on the blanket finally loosened. Only then did I stand. I turned off the main light, leaving just the lamp glowing softly in the corner. And as I stepped out into the hallway, closing the door gently behind me, my phone buzzed. I looked down. "Michael." "Of course," I answered. "Mom," he said immediately, his voice tight. "Is he okay? He's safe," I replied. A long pause. "Then thank you." I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes briefly. "This isn't over, Michael," I said. "I know," "No," I continued. "You don't. Not yet." Silence. He told me things I said quietly. Another pause. What things, he asked. I opened my eyes. The truth, I replied. His breath caught. "Mom, she's been controlling everything I said, the money, you, and she's been using fear to do it. I was trying to fix it," he said again, his voice breaking slightly. "I know," I said, "but you didn't." Silence. Heavy. "I need you to listen to me," I continued. "This isn't just a bad situation anymore. This is something bigger," how he asked. I hesitated for a moment, then said it plainly. "She's already preparing for something." "What do you mean?" "I mean she's not reacting," I said. "She's planning." The line went quiet, and in that silence, I could feel it. The shift. The realization beginning to settle in. "What do we do?" he asked finally. I looked down the hallway, toward the closed bedroom door, toward the child who had trusted me enough to call. We stop treating this like a family argument, I said, and start treating it like what it really is. And what's that? He asked. I took a slow breath, a situation where someone is already writing the story before anyone else gets a chance to speak. Silence. Then I'm scared, Mom. For the first time that night, he sounded like my son again, and I knew then this wasn't just about protecting Ethan anymore. It was about breaking something that had already taken hold, before it spread any further, before it became permanent. We're going to handle this, I said. How I looked out the window, the sky was still dark, but somewhere in the distance, morning was coming. The right way, I said. And for the first time that night, I meant it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind moving through everything I had seen, everything I had heard, and more importantly, everything that hadn't been said yet. Because Rachel wasn't just reacting, she was preparing, and that meant one thing: whatever came next, she would already be a step ahead. By the time the first light of morning filtered through my curtains, I had made up my mind. This was no longer something I could handle with instinct alone. This needed structure, documentation, protection. I got up quietly and made coffee, the familiar routine grounding me just enough to think clearly. As the kettle hummed, I glanced down the hallway toward Ethan's room. Still quiet, still safe. That mattered. I picked up my phone. There was only one person I trusted to help me see this clearly: Evelyn Carter. We had met years ago through a school outreach program. She had been a family court judge for over 25 years before retiring, and even now, she carried herself with that same sharp awareness, like she could read a situation 3 layers deeper than anyone else in the room. She answered on the second ring. "Adeline." "It's early." "I know," I said. I wouldn't call if it wasn't important. That was all she needed. What happened, I didn't rush. I told her everything: the call, the house, the injuries, the control, the money, the threats. I even told her about the way Rachel had shifted, how quickly she moved from chaos to calm, from anger to strategy. Evelyn didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a brief pause. Then she said something that settled deep in my chest. "You're not dealing with a bad marriage," she said. "You're dealing with a controlled environment." I closed my eyes. "Yes," I whispered. "That's exactly what it feels like." "Then stop thinking like a mother," she continued, "and start thinking like a witness." That hit me harder than anything else. A witness, not just someone involved, someone observing, recording, documenting. "What do I need to do?" I asked. "Everything you saw last night, write it down, every detail. Time, behavior, exact words if you can remember them. Take photos of any marks. Get the child evaluated by a professional. And most importantly," she paused, "assume she has already started building her version of the story." My grip tightened on the phone. "I think she has." "Then you're already behind," Evelyn said bluntly, "but not too far." I took a breath. "What about legal help? You'll need it," she said, "sooner rather than later. And not just anyone. Someone who understands custody, financial entanglement, and coercive control." "I know someone," I said. "Rebecca Lawson." The name came to me immediately. Sharp, direct, unshakable. We had crossed paths once years ago during a school-related case, and I remembered thinking she was the kind of woman who didn't lose because she didn't miss anything. "Call her," Evelyn said. "I will." "And Adeline." "Yes, do not assume this will stay contained." A chill ran through me. "What do you mean?" "I mean, she said her voice steady. If she feels control slipping, she will escalate." The line went quiet for a moment. "Protect the child," she added. "Everything else comes after that." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I understand." When I hung up, the house felt different. Not calmer, clearer, like the situation had finally been named for what it was. Not chaos, not confusion, control. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. I turned and walked down the hallway, stopping outside Ethan's door. I knocked softly. "Ethan." A pause. Then, "Yeah, you awake?" "Yeah." I opened the door gently. He was sitting up in bed, the blanket pulled around him, his eyes still heavy but alert. "Did you sleep?" I asked. "A little. That was enough for now." "I'm going to take you to see a doctor today," I said. His expression changed slightly. "Am I in trouble?" "No," I said immediately. "It's just to make sure you're okay." He nodded. "Okay, no resistance, no fear, just quiet acceptance." That told me something else, too. He was used to being evaluated, questioned, observed, and that made my chest tighten again. "Come on," I said gently. "Let's get breakfast first." Downstairs, I kept things simple: toast, eggs, juice, routine, predictable, safe. He ate more this time. Not fast, not hesitant, just normal. And that, more than anything, felt like a small victory. After breakfast, I made the call. Rebecca answered with the same efficiency I remembered. "Lawson, Rebecca, this is Adeline Brooks." A brief pause. Then Adeline. "It's been a while." "It has," I said. "I wish I were calling under better circumstances." "That usually means it's serious," she replied. "It is. Go ahead." I explained everything. Condensed, precise. No emotion, just facts. When I finished, she didn't hesitate. "You did the right thing removing the child," she said. "Now we need to make sure that decision is protected." "How documentation first," she said. "Medical evaluation, photographs, written account from you, and we need to anticipate her next move." "She's already made one," I said. "What do you mean I think she's preparing to accuse us first?" Rebecca didn't sound surprised. "Of course she is." My stomach tightened. "So what do we do?" "We move faster," she said simply. There was a brief pause. "Bring the child in for evaluation today," she continued. "I'll have my assistant schedule you for a consultation this afternoon, and Adeline. Yes, do not communicate with her directly unless necessary. Anything you say can be used against you." I glanced toward Ethan sitting quietly at the table. Understood. When I hung up, I felt it again. That shift. The one that had started the moment I opened that door last night. This wasn't just a situation anymore. It was a process. And it had already begun. But before I could take the next step, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I stared at it for a second, then answered. "Hello." Silence. Then Adeline. "Rachel." "Of course." Her voice was calm, even pleasant. "I was wondering when you'd pick up," she said. "What do you want?" I asked. "I think we need to talk," she replied. "We already did." "No," she said softly. "We really didn't." I felt my pulse quicken. "Ethan is staying with me," I said. "That's not up for discussion right now." A small pause. Then, "That's actually exactly what I want to discuss." "Of course it was." "I'm busy," I said. "I won't take long," she replied. "But I think you'll want to hear this before you make any more decisions." Something in her tone made me still. Not urgency, not anger, confidence. "What is it?" I asked. Another pause. "Then if you don't bring him back today," she said calmly, "I'll have no choice but to report that you've taken him without permission." The words landed clean, sharp, deliberate, and just like that, the next move had been made. For a moment, I didn't respond. Not because I didn't understand what Rachel had just said, but because I understood it too well. This wasn't a reaction. It was strategy. "If you don't bring him back today, I'll report you." She wasn't asking, she was setting a timeline. I stepped away from the kitchen table, lowering my voice. "You go ahead and do that," I said calmly. There was a pause on the other end. Not long, but long enough. "I don't think you understand the position you're putting yourself in," Rachel replied. "No," I said. "I understand exactly what you're trying to do." Silence. Then, "And what is that?" she asked. "You're trying to get ahead of the story," I said, "before anyone else has a chance to tell it." Her tone didn't change. "That's a very dramatic way of looking at a simple situation." "No," I replied. "It's an accurate one." I could almost hear her thinking, adjusting, recalculating. "You removed a child from his home without consent," she said. "That's not something you can just explain away." "I didn't remove him," I said. "He called me. He asked for help. And I responded. That's not how the law works. That's not how fear works either," I shot back. Another pause. Longer this time. Then she exhaled slowly. "I'm trying to keep this from escalating," she said, her voice softening slightly. "For everyone's sake." "No," I said. "You're trying to control how it escalates." Her voice dropped just a fraction. "You really should think carefully about what you do next." "I already have," I said. "Then you know what's at risk." I didn't answer that, because I did. Michael's job, his reputation, his legal exposure, everything Rachel had been holding over him, but there was something she didn't seem to understand. That leverage only worked when people were willing to stay silent. "I'll be in touch," she said finally, and then the line went dead. I stood there for a moment, staring at the phone in my hand. Then I turned back toward the kitchen. Ethan was watching me, quiet, still. "What did she say?" he asked. I walked over slowly and crouched beside him. "She's upset that you're here," I said. "Am I going back?" he asked immediately. There it was again, that question. I held his gaze. "Not today," I said. His shoulders dropped slightly, not relaxed, but less tense. "Okay," he whispered. I stood and checked the time. We needed to move, fast. "Finish your juice," I said. "We're going to see the doctor." He nodded and did exactly as I asked. No hesitation, no resistance, just quiet compliance. And that, more than anything, made me even more certain I was doing the right thing. The clinic was only 10 minutes away, a pediatric urgent care I had trusted for years, not because of convenience, but because of the way they handled children, gently, respectfully, without rushing. We checked in, and within 20 minutes we were called back. The doctor, a woman in her early 40s with a calm voice and steady eyes, introduced herself as Dr. Miller. "Hi, Ethan," she said, crouching slightly to his level. "I'm just going to check how you're doing, okay?" He nodded. She didn't push, didn't rush. She asked simple questions first. "How are you feeling today? Did you sleep okay? Any pain anywhere?" Then gradually she moved closer. "Can I take a look at your arm?" she asked gently. Ethan looked at me. I nodded. "It's okay." He rolled up his sleeve. The marks were still there, faint but visible. Dr. Miller didn't react dramatically. She simply observed, carefully, professionally. "Does this hurt?" she asked, pressing lightly. "A little," Ethan said. She nodded and made a note. Then she asked something else. "Can you tell me what happened?" Ethan hesitated. His eyes shifted. For a moment I thought he might shut down, but then... "She grabbed me," he said quietly. Dr. Miller didn't interrupt. "She got mad," he added, "and then she slapped me." The room went still, not tense, not chaotic, just still. Because the truth had been spoken, clearly, without confusion, without exaggeration. Dr. Miller nodded again. "Thank you for telling me," she said. That was it. No shock, no judgment, just acknowledgement. And in that moment, I saw something shift in Ethan again. Not relief, not yet, but recognition. Like someone had finally heard him and believed him. The rest of the exam was routine. But when it was done, Dr. Miller asked to speak with me privately. Ethan stayed in the room with a nurse while we stepped just outside. Her tone changed slightly, more serious. "I'm required to document this," she said. "And based on what I've observed and what he's reported, this meets criteria for concern." I nodded. "I understand. Are you his legal guardian?" "No," I said. "I'm his grandmother. He called me last night." She studied me for a moment. "Is he safe right now?" "Yes." She held my gaze. "Then we proceed carefully," she said. "But this will likely trigger a report." I expected that I replied. She nodded. "Good." There was a brief pause. "Do you have legal support?" she asked. "Yes." "Then stay in contact with them," she said. "Because once this starts moving, it won't slow down. I already knew that. I could feel it. Everything was shifting now, faster than before, more visible, more real." We returned to the room, and Ethan looked up at me immediately. "Are we going home?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He nodded. Simple, trusting. And that trust, it settled into me like something permanent, something I couldn't afford to fail. Back in the car, he leaned his head against the window, watching the world pass by. After a few minutes, he spoke again. "Grandma, yes, are you going to be mad at Dad?" The question caught me off guard. "No," I said carefully. "I'm not mad at him." "Why not?" he asked. "Because he made mistakes. Because he stayed silent. Because he let this happen." All of those answers were true, but none of them were the one he needed. "Because he's trying to do better," I said. Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Then I think he's scared," he said. I glanced at him. "I think you're right." He nodded slightly, then leaned back again and didn't say anything else. When we got home, I helped him settle back into the same room. Same bed, same light, same quiet, consistency that mattered now more than ever. I stepped out into the hallway and pulled out my phone. Rebecca had sent a message. "Call me when you're done. We need to move now." I dialed immediately. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me everything," she said. I did. The clinic, the marks, the statements, the report. When I finished, she didn't hesitate. "Good," she said. "Good," I repeated. "Yes," she said. "Because now we have documentation." My grip tightened slightly. "And Rachel?" I asked. "She's going to escalate." Rebecca replied. That's what people like her do when control starts slipping. I know, I said quietly. Then we don't wait, she continued. We prepare. For what? There was a brief pause. Then, for the moment she tries to turn this against you. A chill ran through me, because deep down I already knew. That moment wasn't coming. It had already begun. By the time I hung up with Rebecca, the house no longer felt like a place of quiet recovery. It felt like a place of preparation. Everything had shifted. Every word, every action, every decision now mattered in a way it hadn't just 24 hours ago. There was no more waiting to see how things play out. That option was gone the moment Rachel made her move. Now we had to stay ahead. I walked into the living room and sat down, pulling out a notebook from the drawer beside the couch. Evelyn's words echoed in my mind. Stop thinking like a mother. Start thinking like a witness. So I began writing. Time 7 a.m. phone call from Ethan. Exact words. Grandma. She hit me. Tone whispering, crying, fearful. I wrote everything I could remember. The drive, the house, the broken frame, Michael's injuries, Rachel's statements. I didn't rush. I didn't assume. Just facts, clear, precise, undeniable. At some point I realized my hands had stopped shaking. Not because things were less serious, but because I finally had direction. After nearly an hour, I closed the notebook and exhaled slowly. That's when I heard a soft knock. Not at the front door, at the bedroom door. Ethan. Come in, I said. He stepped inside quietly, still holding the small toy I had seen in his backpack. Can I sit with you? He asked. Of course. He walked over and climbed onto the couch beside me, tucking his legs underneath him. We sat in silence for a moment. Then are we in trouble, he asked. No, I said immediately. But she said I know what she said, I interrupted gently. And I know it can feel scary. But listen to me, okay? He nodded. You didn't do anything wrong, I said, and neither did I. He studied my face carefully like he was measuring whether to believe me. Then why does it feel like something bad is going to happen, he asked. Because it is. The thought came quickly, sharp, honest, but I didn't say it. Instead, I reached for his hand, because sometimes I said slowly when people start telling the truth, things get uncomfortable before they get better. He frowned slightly. I don't like uncomfortable. I smiled faintly. Neither do I. That seemed to ease him just a little. Will you stay with me, he asked. I'm not going anywhere, I said. He leaned against me, then resting his head lightly against my arm, and for a few minutes, everything was still. Then my phone rang. Again. Unknown number. I looked at it, then answered. Hello, Mrs. Brooks. The voice was male. Professional. Yes. This is Officer Grant with Columbus Police Department. We received a report regarding a minor possibly being taken without parental consent. There it was. Faster than I expected. I understand, I said calmly. We'd like to confirm the child's location and ensure his safety, he continued. He's with me, I said, and he's safe. There was a brief pause. Can you provide your address, I did? Thank you, he said. We'll have an officer stop by to follow up. Of course. The line clicked. I lowered the phone slowly. Ethan looked up at me. Who was that? I hesitated for a fraction of a second, then chose honesty. Police, I said. His body tensed instantly. Am I in trouble? He asked again, his voice smaller this time. No, I said firmly. You're not in trouble. Then why are they coming? Because someone told them a story, I said, and now they need to hear the truth. He stared at me, then nodded slowly, but his grip on my sleeve tightened. I wrapped an arm around him gently. It's okay, I said. I'm right here. Inside, though, I could feel it. The shift Rebecca had warned about. Rachel wasn't just preparing anymore. She was acting. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Firm, official. I stood taking a steady breath and walked to open it. A uniformed officer stood on the porch, mid-30s, calm expression, observant eyes. Mrs. Brooks, he asked. Yes, I'm Officer Grant, he said. Mind if I come in, please? He stepped inside, glancing around briefly before his attention settled on me. I understand your grandson is here. Yes, and his parents are requesting his return. I'm aware. He nodded. Can you tell me what happened last night? I didn't hesitate. I told him everything. Clear, direct. No embellishment, no emotion beyond what was necessary. He listened carefully, occasionally making notes. "And you have documentation?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Photos, medical evaluation. And I've written down everything I observed." That seemed to matter. "And the child?" he asked. "He's upstairs. Would it be okay if I spoke with him?" I paused. Not because I didn't want him to, but because I knew this mattered. "Yes," I said finally, "but I'd like to be present." "That's fine," he replied. We walked upstairs together. I knocked gently before opening the door. Ethan sat up immediately when he saw us. His eyes moved quickly to the officer. Fear, clear, immediate. "It's okay," I said softly. "He just wants to talk." The officer crouched slightly, lowering himself to Ethan's level. "Hi, Ethan," he said gently. "I just need to ask you a couple of questions, all right?" Ethan looked at me. I nodded. He swallowed. "Okay." The officer kept his voice calm. "Are you hurt anywhere right now?" Ethan shook his head. "Did anything happen last night that scared you?" A pause. "Then yes. What happened?" Ethan hesitated. His eyes flicked toward me, then back to the officer. "She got mad," he said quietly. Who, the officer asked. "My mom." The word hung in the air, clear, unfiltered. "And what did she do?" the officer asked gently. Ethan took a breath. "She grabbed me," he said, "and she slapped me." Silence, again, heavy. But this time it felt different. Because it wasn't just my word anymore. It wasn't just suspicion. It was his voice, his truth, spoken out loud. The officer nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me," he said. He stood turning back toward me. "I'll include this in my report," he said quietly. "Thank you," I replied. We walked back downstairs. At the door, he paused. "I'm not making any immediate removals or demands today," he said, "but this will be followed up. I understand." He studied me for a moment. "You're doing the right thing," he added, and then he left. I closed the door slowly, locked it, and leaned back against it for just a second. Not relief, not yet, but something close. Because for the first time since that phone call, the truth wasn't just inside this house anymore. It had been spoken, recorded, set in motion, and there was no taking it back now. After the door closed, the house felt quieter than before. But it wasn't the same kind of quiet. This wasn't fragile silence. This was the kind that follows something being set into motion, something that can't be undone. I stood there for a moment, my hand still resting on the door, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle fully into place. The police had been here. They had listened. They had written it down. And now it was real. I pushed away from the door and walked slowly back into the living room. Ethan was halfway down the stairs again, watching me. Always watching. "Are they gone?" he asked. "Yes," I said gently. "Am I okay?" I nodded. "You're okay." He came down the rest of the steps, slower this time, more cautious. "Did I say something wrong?" he asked. That question again, it told me how deeply this had shaped him. "No," I said firmly. "You told the truth." He looked at me carefully. "That's good, right?" "That's always good," I replied. He seemed to consider that, then nodded. "Okay." I guided him back into the living room, settling him onto the couch with a blanket. I turned on the television, not for distraction, but for normalcy. Something soft, predictable. Gentle noise to fill the space. He leaned into the corner, watching quietly. And for the first time since he arrived, he didn't look like he was waiting for something bad to happen. That was enough for now. I stepped into the kitchen and picked up my phone again. "Rebecca," she answered immediately. "Tell me," she said. "The police came," I said, "and they spoke to Ethan. Took a report. No immediate action." "Good," she said. "Good," I repeated again. "Yes," she said, "because now there's a record from a neutral party. That matters." I leaned against the counter. "She reported me," I said. "Of course she did. She's not slowing down." "No," Rebecca replied. "She's accelerating." There was a brief pause, "Which means we do too." "What's next?" I asked. "Temporary custody hearing," she said. "As soon as possible." My chest tightened. "That fast?" "It has to be," she replied. "Right now, everything is fluid. Whoever establishes credibility first gains ground. And you think she's trying to do that?" "I know she is." I closed my eyes briefly. "She's already building her case," Rebecca continued, "probably painting you as interfering, painting Michael as unstable, painting herself as the only consistent parent." "That's exactly what she's doing," I said. "I thought so." Silence stretched between us for a moment. "Then I need you to come in this afternoon," she said. "Bring everything you have. Notes, photos, medical report. I will." And Adeline. "Yes, this is where it gets harder." "I already knew that. I'm ready," I said. You may think you are, she replied gently, but court isn't about what feels right. It's about what can be proven. I looked toward the living room, toward Ethan. I understand. When I hung up, I stood there for a long moment. Then I walked back into the living room. Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch, the blanket half wrapped around him, his breathing steady, peaceful. I watched him for a moment, then quietly turned off the television, because he didn't need noise anymore. He needed rest. The afternoon came faster than I expected. I gathered everything, my notes, the photos, the clinic paperwork, every piece of truth I could hold on to. Before we left, I knelt beside Ethan. "Hey," I said softly, "we're going to go out for a bit." He blinked awake slowly. "We're to talk to someone who can help us." He nodded. No questions, just trust. That word again, heavy, important. We drove to Rebecca's office in silence. Not uncomfortable silence, just focused. When we arrived, her assistant greeted us immediately and led us inside. Rebecca was already waiting. She stood as we entered, tall, composed, focused. She shook my hand first, then crouched slightly to Ethan's level. "Hi, Ethan," she said gently. "I'm Rebecca." He nodded. "That's a strong name," she added. He blinked, then gave the smallest hint of a smile. It was enough. She straightened and motioned for us to sit. "Let's begin," she said. I handed her everything. She reviewed it carefully. No rushing, no skipping, every detail mattered to her. "That's good," she said finally. "Very good." Relief flickered in my chest. "But it's not enough," she added. "Of course it wasn't. It's a strong start," she clarified. "But we need to anticipate how she'll respond." "She's going to lie," I said. Rebecca shook her head slightly. "No," she said, "she's going to frame." That word hit differently. "She'll take truth and reshape it," Rebecca continued. "Your presence becomes interference. His fear becomes confusion. Her actions become discipline." My stomach tightened. "And Michael?" I asked. She glanced at me. "He's vulnerable," she said. "Financial mistakes, hidden decisions, that will be used against him, I know." Which means, she said, leaning forward slightly, he has to decide where he stands. I nodded slowly. "He's starting to," I said. "Starting isn't enough," she replied. "I knew that too. We went over everything again. Strategy, timeline, possible outcomes. And then court is tomorrow morning," she said. I blinked. "That's soon, yes." My heart began to pound again. "Temporary custody hearing," she explained. "Initial positioning." I nodded. Ethan shifted slightly beside me. "Do I have to go?" he asked quietly. Rebecca's expression softened. "No," she said, "not tomorrow." He relaxed slightly. "Okay," but I could see it in his eyes, the awareness. Something was happening, something big, and he was part of it. That night, after we returned home, everything felt different again. Not uncertain, not chaotic. Just heavy with what was coming. I tucked Ethan into bed. Same room, same light, same quiet. "Will you be here when I wake up?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Promise, I promise." He nodded, then closed his eyes. I stood there for a moment longer, then turned off the light and stepped out. Later, as I sat alone in the living room, my phone buzzed again. "Michael," I answered. "Mom," he said. His voice sounded different. Not broken, not panicked, focused. "I'm coming tomorrow," he said, "for court." "Yes." A pause. "I'm going to tell the truth." I closed my eyes. "That was everything. Are you sure?" I asked. "Yes." Another pause. "I should have done it sooner," he added quietly. "Yes," I said, "you should have." Silence. "Then I'm scared," he admitted. "I know," I said, "but I'm not staying silent anymore." I took a slow breath. Good. Because that was the moment everything truly began to change. The courthouse always smells the same. Polished floors, old paper, something faintly metallic in the air that settles in your throat if you stay too long. I hadn't stepped into one in years, not since retirement events and school board hearings that felt formal but harmless. This was different. This felt like walking into a place where truth had to fight to be heard. Ethan stayed home with a neighbor I trusted, a retired nurse named Mrs. Alvarez, who had known me for years. I didn't want him anywhere near this room, not yet, not until I understood how much of this would be exposed. As I stepped through security, Rebecca walked beside me. Her posture straight, her expression calm, in that way that made it clear she had done this many times before. "Remember," she said quietly, not looking at me, "you answer only what is asked. Don't fill silence. Don't explain beyond the question." "I understand." "Good." We entered the hallway outside the courtroom, and that's when I saw her, Rachel. She stood near the far wall dressed in a soft cream blouse and tailored slacks, her hair pulled back neatly, her makeup flawless. If I didn't know better, if I hadn't been in that house the night before, I might have thought she was exactly what she wanted the world to see. Composed, respectable, wronged. She wasn't alone. Her attorney stood beside her, flipping through a folder, speaking in low, measured tones. Rachel nodded occasionally, her expression attentive, cooperative, prepared. Her eyes found me almost immediately, and for a split second she smiled, not warmly, not kindly, but knowingly, like we were both stepping onto a stage where she already knew her lines. I held her gaze, didn't react, didn't engage. Beside me, Rebecca leaned in slightly. "Don't take the bait," she murmured. "I won't." Michael arrived a few minutes later. I almost didn't recognize him at first. He looked smaller, not physically, but something in his posture had changed. The way he held himself, the way his shoulders curved inward like he was carrying something heavier than before. But his eyes were clear. He walked toward us slowly. "Mom," he said, "Michael." We stood there for a second, not hugging, not reaching, just acknowledging the distance that had been there for too long. Then he nodded. "I'm ready." I studied him. "Are you sure?" He swallowed. "No," he admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway." That was enough. Rebecca stepped forward. "Good," she said, "because today isn't about comfort. It's about clarity." A clerk opened the courtroom door. "We're ready." And just like that, it began. The room felt colder than the hallway. Not in temperature, in tone, structured, controlled. Every movement had purpose. Every voice carried weight. We took our seats. Rachel and her attorney on one side, Rebecca, Michael, and I on the other. The judge entered shortly after. A woman in her early 60s, sharp-eyed, composed. The kind of presence that didn't need to raise its voice to be heard. "Let's begin," she said. Rachel's attorney stood first. "Of course. Your Honor," he began, his tone smooth and practiced. "This is a case of a concerned mother whose child was taken without consent by a third party, specifically the paternal grandmother, following what appears to be a family disagreement." I felt my jaw tighten. There it was, the frame, clean, simple, misleading. He continued. "My client, Mrs. Brooks, has been the primary caregiver for this child. She has maintained a stable home environment and has been managing significant financial and emotional stress due to her husband's recent instability. Instability. The word landed exactly as intended. I glanced at Michael. He didn't move, didn't react, but I could see it, the weight of it. Furthermore, the attorney added there is concern that the child has been influenced by external parties to misinterpret normal disciplinary actions as abuse. There it was again, reshaping truth, twisting language, turning fear into confusion. Rebecca didn't move. She waited, patient, focused. When the judge nodded, signaling it was her turn, she stood calmly. "Your Honor," she said, "we are not here because of a misunderstanding. We are here because a child placed a call at 2:07 a.m., whispering in fear, stating clearly that he had been struck." The room shifted, subtly. But more importantly, she continued, "We have documentation." She presented it. Photos, medical report, written statements, each piece laid out cleanly, clearly, without exaggeration. The judge reviewed them carefully. No reaction, no expression, just attention. Additionally, Rebecca said we have testimony from the responding officer who spoke directly with the child and recorded his statement independently. That mattered. Neutral confirmation. The judge nodded slightly, then turned toward Rachel. "Mrs. Brooks," she said, "would you like to respond?" Rachel stood, graceful, composed. "Yes, Your Honor," she said, her voice steady, almost gentle. "I love my son," she began. "Everything I do is for his well-being. Last night was a difficult moment. I was overwhelmed, and yes, I may have been firm, but I did not abuse my child." She paused. Just long enough. I believe he was confused, frightened by the argument between myself and my husband. There it was, redirecting, softening, reframing. And as for my mother-in-law, she continued, glancing briefly at me. "I believe her intentions may be good, but her involvement has escalated the situation unnecessarily. Escalated interference. Every word carefully chosen." The judge turned toward Michael. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "your perspective." The room went still. This was the moment. Michael stood. I could see the tension in his hands, the way his fingers curled slightly as he steadied himself. My son was scared, he said. Simple, clear, no embellishment. And why was he scared, the judge asked. Michael hesitated, just for a second, and I felt it. That familiar pull, fear, shame, the instinct to soften the truth. But then he didn't. Because this wasn't the first time, he said. The room shifted again, more noticeably this time. Rachel's head turned sharply toward him, that composure it cracked. Just slightly, but enough. What do you mean by that? The judge asked. Michael took a breath. I mean, he said, his voice steadier now that there have been other incidents, arguments, escalations, and yes, physical reactions. The words landed heavy, real, irreversible. Rachel's attorney stood immediately. Objection, but the judge raised a hand. Let him finish. Michael nodded. I made mistakes, he continued. Financial ones. I hid them. And that gave Rachel leverage over me, control over everything. There it was, out in the open, the truth he had been carrying. And because of that, he added, I stayed quiet when I shouldn't have. Silence. Complete. Total. The judge watched him carefully, and now she asked. Michael didn't hesitate. Now I'm not staying quiet anymore. And in that moment, everything changed. The silence that followed Michael's words felt different from every other silence in that room. Not tense, not uncertain, settled, like something had finally been placed where it belonged. Rachel didn't move at first, but I could see it in her face. That calm, controlled mask she had worn so carefully since we walked in it slipped. Just for a second. But in a courtroom, sometimes a second is all it takes. Her attorney stood quickly. Your Honor, we need to clarify my client has not been accused of any pattern of abuse. This is being reframed in a way that exaggerates isolated incidents. Reframed. There it was again. Always about control of the narrative. Rebecca didn't interrupt. She simply stood when the judge gestured to her. Your Honor, she said calmly, this is not about exaggeration. It is about pattern recognition. She stepped forward slightly. Children rarely fabricate fear in whispers. At 2 a.m, she continued. They react to environments. Consistent environments. The judge leaned back slightly, her eyes moving between all of us. Mrs. Brooks, she said, turning to Rachel again, I'm going to ask you directly. Rachel straightened. Yes, Your Honor. Have you at any point used physical force as a form of discipline? A pause, just long enough to matter. Then yes, Rachel said. Her attorney stiffened slightly beside her, but never with intent to harm, she added quickly, only to correct behavior. The judge nodded slowly. And how often would you say this occurred? Rachel hesitated. Occasionally, she said. Define occasionally. Another pause. This one longer. I don't keep count, she replied. That answer didn't land well. I could see it, not just in the judge's expression, but in the room itself. Because vagueness in a place like this feels like avoidance. The judge made a note, then turned back toward Rebecca. Continue. Rebecca didn't waste a second. We would like to introduce additional context, she said. She gestured toward Michael. Mr. Brooks, earlier you mentioned control over financial and personal matters. Can you elaborate? Michael nodded. Yes, he said. After my financial situation became unstable, Rachel took control of all accounts, my email, my passwords, my access to everything. And did you consent to that freely? Rebecca asked. Michael hesitated. Then no. The word hung in the air, clear, uncomplicated. Why did you agree to it? Rebecca continued. Michael swallowed. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? A pause. Then of losing everything he said, my job, my reputation, my son. Rebecca nodded slightly. And did that fear affect your ability to speak up about what was happening in your home? Yes. That answer came faster, stronger, because now he understood what he was saying, what it meant. Rebecca turned slightly toward the judge. Your Honor, what we are seeing here is not a simple disagreement over parenting methods. It is a pattern of control, financial, emotional, and behavioral, that created an environment where both the child and the father felt unsafe speaking out. Rachel's attorney stood again. Objection speculation overruled, the judge said calmly. And just like that, the balance shifted. Not dramatically, not completely, but enough. Enough that the truth had space now. Rebecca stepped back. Your Honor, we are not asking for a final determination today, she said. only for temporary protection so that this child is not returned to an environment that has already been shown to cause fear. The word protection lingered, because that's what this had become. Not accusation, not punishment, protection. The judge folded her hands slightly, then looked toward Rachel. "Mrs. Brooks," she said, "do you have anything further to add?" Rachel stood again, but this time she wasn't the same. Still composed, still controlled, but there was something else underneath now. Pressure. "I have always provided for my son," she said. "I have kept this family stable under difficult circumstances. Yes, I made mistakes, but I am not the danger here." Her eyes flicked briefly toward Michael, then back to the judge. "I believe this situation is being distorted," she continued, "and I believe removing my child from my home is more harmful than anything that occurred last night." Her voice didn't shake, but it didn't carry the same certainty either, because now there were too many pieces on the table, too many voices, too many truths that didn't align with the version she had built. The judge nodded once, then leaned back slightly. "I've heard enough for today," she said. The room stilled again, but this time it wasn't uncertain. It was anticipatory, because now a decision was coming. The judge glanced down at her notes, then back up. Based on the information presented, she began, "There is sufficient concern regarding the child's current environment to warrant temporary intervention." My heart began to pound. Effective immediately, she continued, "Temporary custody of the minor child will remain with the grandmother, Mrs. Adeline Brooks, pending further review." A breath I didn't realize I was holding, finally released. But the judge wasn't finished. "Mr. Brooks," she said, turning to Michael, "you will be granted supervised visitation contingent upon compliance with further evaluation." Michael nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." "Mrs. Brooks," she said, turning to Rachel, "you will refrain from unsupervised contact with the child until additional assessments are completed." Rachel's face went still, completely still. Not anger, not shock, just blank. The kind of stillness that comes when control is taken away. "This is a temporary measure," the judge continued, "not a final ruling. Further hearings will be scheduled. In the meantime, all parties are expected to cooperate fully." She paused, then added, "And I strongly advise all involved to prioritize the well-being of the child above all else." The gavel didn't need to strike. The message was already clear. It was done, for now. As we stood to leave, I felt it. Not relief, not victory. Something quieter, heavier, because this wasn't over, not even close. Rachel didn't look at me as she gathered her things, but as she turned to leave, she paused, just for a second, and then she looked at Michael. Not angry, not emotional, just calculating. And in that look, I understood something. This wasn't the end of her control. It was just the beginning of her losing it. And people like that don't let go easily. Outside the courtroom, Michael stopped. "Mom," he said. I turned. His eyes were different now, not just clear, present. "I meant what I said in there," he added. "I'm not staying silent anymore." I nodded. "I know." A pause. I should have protected him sooner. "Yes," I said gently. He swallowed. "But I will now." I held his gaze, and for the first time in a long time, I believed him. Because truth once spoken out loud has a way of changing everything. The house felt different when we walked back in that afternoon. Not quieter, not lighter, just rearranged. Like everything inside it had shifted slightly to make room for something new. Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table with Mrs. Alvarez when we arrived, coloring carefully inside the lines of a picture I didn't recognize. When he saw me, he stood up immediately. "Grandma," I smiled. "Hey, sweetheart." He looked past me. "Did you go to court?" "Yes." A pause. "Am I coming home?" There it was again, the question that held everything. I walked over slowly and knelt in front of him. "You're staying here with me," I said. His eyes searched mine. "For how long?" "For now," I said gently, "until we make sure everything is safe." He didn't respond right away. Then he nodded. Not excitement, not relief, just acceptance. But this time there was something else in it. Trust. That word again. It had become the center of everything. Mrs. Alvarez gave me a small, knowing look as she gathered her things. "I'll check in tomorrow," she said softly. "Thank you," I replied. After she left the house settled again, Just the two of us. I moved around the kitchen preparing something simple for dinner: grilled chicken rice vegetables. Routine, structure, things that didn't require explanation. Ethan stayed at the table still coloring, but this time he hummed, quietly, under his breath. It was such a small sound, but it filled the room in a way silence never could. "Do you like baseball?" I asked casually. He looked up. "A little. There's a team down the street that practices on Saturdays," I said. "I used to watch them sometimes." His eyes lit just a fraction. "Really, really?" A pause. "Can I go?" "Yes," I said. "If you want to." He nodded slowly. "Okay." And just like that, something opened. Small, fragile, but real. Later that evening, after dinner and a quiet hour of television, I helped him get ready for bed again. Same room, same routine, same light, but this time he didn't ask if I would still be there in the morning. He just said, "Good night, Grandma." And that was progress. I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, watching as his breathing slowed, his body settling more naturally into the mattress. No tension in his shoulders, no tight grip on the blanket, just sleep. The kind that comes when fear loosens its hold. I turned off the light and stepped out quietly. Closing the door behind me felt different tonight. Not like protection, like continuation. In the living room, I sat down slowly, letting the day finally settle into me. Court, statements, decisions. Everything had moved so quickly, but now there was space to feel it. The weight, the cost. Because even though Ethan was safe, nothing about this felt like a victory. Not yet. My phone buzzed. "Michael," I answered. "Hey." His voice sounded tired, but steady. "How is he?" he asked. "He's okay," I said. "He ate. He's sleeping." A pause. "Thank you." "You don't need to thank me," I replied. "Yes, I do," he said quietly. I leaned back against the couch. "How are you?" I asked. A longer pause this time. "I don't know," he admitted. "Everything feels exposed." "It is," I said. "Yeah." Silence. "Then she's not going to stop, is she?" he asked. I didn't answer right away because I wanted to choose the truth. "Yes," I said finally. "She'll keep trying." Another pause. "I thought I was protecting us," he said. "I know, but I was just helping her keep control." The words were heavy, but necessary. "Yes," I said. He exhaled slowly. "I see that now." That mattered, not because it fixed anything, but because it meant something had changed inside him. "What happens next?" he asked. "We follow through," I said. "We stay consistent. We don't react emotionally. We respond carefully." "That sounds like you," he said, almost with a faint smile in his voice. "It's what I learned a long time ago," I replied. "From work, yes." A pause. "You always knew how to see things," he added. "I didn't see this," I said quietly. Silence. "Then neither did I," he admitted. We sat in that truth for a moment because blame didn't matter anymore. Only what came next. "I'm going to do the counseling," he said. "Good." "And the financial review." "Good." "I want to fix this," he said. I closed my eyes briefly. "You will," I said. "But not all at once." "I know." Another pause. "Can I see him soon?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "We'll arrange it the right way." "Okay." And then Mom. "Yes, I'm not going back to how things were." I held the phone a little tighter. "Then don't," I said. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, thinking. Not about what had happened, but about what hadn't. Rachel hadn't called again. No messages, no new threats, and that concerned me more than anything else. Because silence from someone like her was never empty. It was preparation. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. Everything looked normal, still, peaceful, but I knew better now. I knew how quickly things could shift beneath the surface, how control could exist where no one else could see it, and how easily it could be mistaken for something else. I rested my hand lightly against the glass, and for the first time since that phone call, I allowed myself to feel something close to hope. Not certainty, not safety, but direction. Because Ethan was here, because Michael had spoken, because the truth had started to take shape, and that was how change began. Slow, uncomfortable, but real. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked softly. I listened for a moment, then smiled faintly. Just movement. Just life. Nothing to fear. I turned off the lights in the living room, and as I made my way upstairs, one thought stayed with me: this wasn't over. But for the first time, it wasn't hidden anymore. The first time Ethan laughed again, it surprised both of us. It happened on a quiet Saturday morning about 6 weeks after that night. We were standing at the edge of a small baseball field just down the street, the kind with uneven grass and a fence that had been repainted too many times. A group of kids his age were practicing throwing missing, laughing, trying again. Ethan stood beside me, his hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket, watching carefully. Not afraid, just observing. "You want to try?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. A coach kind patient, the type who understood children without needing long explanations, walked over and handed him a glove. "Ever played before?" he asked. A little Ethan said. "Good enough," the coach smiled. "Come on." Ethan stepped forward slowly, cautiously, but he didn't stop. And when the ball came toward him, awkward, uneven, not quite straight, he fumbled it, dropped it, then looked up quickly, like he was waiting for something, a reaction, a correction, a consequence, but none came. The coach just shrugged. "Try again." Ethan blinked, then nodded. The next throw, he caught it. Not perfectly, but enough. And that's when it happened, that small, unexpected sound. A laugh, quick, soft, real. I felt it in my chest before I even realized I was smiling, because that laugh, that was something we almost lost. Life didn't return to normal. It became something new. Michael started therapy the week after the hearing, not because he was forced to, because he chose to. That mattered. He also took a step back from his old job, accepting a smaller position with less pressure and more accountability. It wasn't easy for him. I could see it, the shift in his pride, the quiet adjustments he had to make. But he didn't complain, not once, because now he understood what had been at stake and what still was. His visits with Ethan began slowly. Supervised at first, structured, careful. The first time they saw each other, Ethan stood behind me, hesitant. Not afraid, but unsure. Michael knelt down. "I'm here," he said. That was all. No promises. No explanations, just presence. Ethan didn't move right away, but then step by step he walked forward. And when Michael wrapped his arms around him, it wasn't tight. It wasn't desperate. It was steady. The kind of hug that says, "I'm not going anywhere." Not this time. As for Rachel, the process continued. Investigations, financial reviews, legal proceedings that moved slower than emotions but carried far more weight. The truth about the money came out piece by piece. Accounts opened without full disclosure. Funds redirected. Decisions made under pressure and control. It wasn't clean. It wasn't simple. But it was clear enough. She didn't disappear. She didn't break down. She adapted. That's what people like her do. But something had changed. She no longer controlled the narrative. And without that, everything else began to unravel. One evening, months later, I sat on the porch as the sun dipped low behind the trees. Ethan was inside finishing homework. Michael had just left after dinner, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt still. Not empty, not tense, just balanced. My phone rang. I looked down. "Ethan." From upstairs, I answered. "Hello, Grandma." His voice, clear, calm, no whisper, no fear. "Yes, sweetheart, I just wanted to say goodnight." I smiled. "I'll be up in a minute," I know he said. But I wanted to say it now. A pause. Then "I love you." The words settled into me slowly, deeply. "I love you too," I said. And when the call ended, I sat there for a moment longer, letting it sink in, because that simple, ordinary call was everything. Not because of what was said, but because of how it was said. No fear, no urgency, just connection, just love. I thought back to that night, 2:07 a.m. A whisper, a child too scared to speak out loud, and I realized something then. Something I hadn't fully understood before. Danger doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks quiet, controlled, carefully managed. It hides in routines, in explanations, in the spaces where no one is looking too closely. And sometimes it takes a single moment of truth to break it open. A phone call, a whisper, a decision not to ignore it. That was all it took, but it also took everything after that. The fear, the confrontation, the court, the honesty to turn that moment into change. Real change. Not perfect, not complete, but enough. Enough to give a child his voice back. Enough to give a father his courage. Enough to remind me that love, real love, doesn't stay quiet when something is wrong. It steps in, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's messy, even when it changes everything. That night, I walked upstairs and paused outside Ethan's door. I didn't knock, not because I wasn't welcome, but because I remembered the first time I chose not to, and how everything changed after that. I opened the door gently. He was already under the covers, the soft light still on. "Good night, Grandma," he said. "Good night, sweetheart." I turned off the light, and as I closed the door, I knew something with absolute certainty. We hadn't just survived that night. We had broken something that would never control us again. And that was enough. Sometimes the most dangerous situations are not the ones filled with noise, but the ones wrapped in silence. We often believe that if something were truly wrong, it would be obvious, loud, visible, impossible to ignore. But that's not always how it works. Sometimes fear whispers. Sometimes control looks like care. Sometimes people stay quiet not because nothing is happening, but because they're afraid of what will happen if they speak. This story is a reminder of something simple but powerful. When a child says they are scared, believe them. When something feels wrong, don't explain it away. And when the moment comes to step in, do it, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it changes everything, because silence protects the problem. But truth protects people. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear from you. What would you have done in that moment? Have you ever faced a situation where speaking up changed everything? Tell me in the comments and share where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. And if stories like this matter to you, don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes the stories we share are the ones someone else needs to hear the most.